Alright, we're going to talk about customer use scenarios and how they can help us gain a better understanding of the customer, scenario in which they find themselves, and the problem or pain point. This is the tool that you can use. You can access it there, and I'll come back to it later, but you'll see I'm trying to share with you the background information to help you understand what's happening here and jump right into it when you do. There are three pieces, three components. One is the scenario itself, which is a set of steps or tasks that somebody goes through in their environment when they're interacting with your offering when you introduce it. Or perhaps you're analyzing before your offering is introduced and trying to understand. It's a bit of a thought experiment in understanding their context and what they go through. The second is, that's been implied, but there's a person involved. There's a user or a buyer or some kind of persona anyway that can be represented. And from understanding those, from putting yourselves into that user's shoes and taking yourself through their steps, seeing it from their view, you gain insights about your process, or about your context, about what your offering might need to do. This is how we typically map it, somewhat like a process flow, a series of steps or tasks, one after the other. It doesn't have to be linear, it doesn't have to be just one line of activity, but this is the simplified view of it. And below that, I capture insights. And of course, you can put insights anywhere you want around it. This is sort of how the tool is set up. So we're looking to understand the personas, the context, steps they carry out, and gain insight from that. So let's have an example. Here is Madge. She's my persona. She's a student, 20 years old, shares an apartment, takes the bus and works part-time. And I often like to actually sketch them out on a single sheet of paper and capture things like this that are typically demographic, psychographic, definitional. Who is this person? And things that might be more fun, like she likes chocolate, she doesn't like math, she loves painting, she hikes, and she loves purple. And some of these are relevant, some of these are completely irrelevant. But this is just one imagined, invented individual within the group of people I'm trying to understand better. So let's move that over and let's pretend for this example that I'm interested in solving a problem, understanding a problem related to textbooks. Is there a better approach? And that's why I'm doing this use scenario, is to better understand how somebody like Marge interacts with textbooks and what can we learn from that. So let's talk about what we assume she goes through. She looks up in her course outline what materials are needed. She then buys those from the bookstore. She brings them to class, she uses them in class, and she sells them after the course is finished. Those are basic, they're assumed to be true, they're generic, and these are the steps that I'm going to start with. And then imagine sitting at a table around a desk with a couple of people trying to sketch this out. And we might say, okay, what insights could we gain from this? And a crude pass at that might yield, well, I guess the bookstore needs to stock the books. She's bringing a lot of books to class if she's taking more than one, so she needs a backpack. And okay, there might need to be a buyback from the bookstore because she wants to sell them, or a peer-to-peer selling solution or something like that. So this is what 10 minutes in I might have in front of me in terms of this scenario. It's not good enough, but it's a start. So let's go deeper. And I want to push you to go deeper in a couple ways here, and one of them is this. In the bottom right there, I've written that bottom right-hand green box there, the buyback, of the bookstore offering a buyback or peer-to-peer solution, is talking about solutions. And that's not what we should be doing in this scenario. And I've done this on purpose because it's so tempting, and we want to do this. We want to look at their scenario, we want to pretend we're them, and we want to design out solutions, and that's what we tend to put in the insights box. And I want to shift that. I want you to be instead talking about the what and the why of the problem, or the what and the why perhaps of the user. But what do we learn about their context? What do we learn about their problem or pain point? So let's forget this solution we put on the table, this buyback. Let's not talk about solutions. Let's talk about the problem. Well, she sells it after the course because she wants to sell it. It's fairly obvious, but let's peel another layer off that and ask why again. Well, she wants to sell the book because perhaps she wants or needs the money. Okay, so why would she need the money? Well, the cost of the book was too high. So now we've got somewhere. I've gathered some understanding of the context and of the needs and wants of this person in that context. So let's move over to this one. Needing a backpack was a fairly irrelevant insight. So when it comes to designing better textbook solutions. So let's take the same approach of focusing on the problem instead. Well, the problem, if you flip that around, is 5 to 6 textbooks are heavy. If you're taking 4 to 6 classes, that's a heavy thing to carry around. So I've only done a little bit here of going deeper, but I hope you get the idea, and I hope you see the shift in focus from capturing solutions to capturing understandings of the problem. The next way to go deeper is to make it real. I can sit in a room, boardroom, classroom, around a desk for as long as I want and never get it right, unless I go ask someone real who is like your persona. Then go ask someone else and someone else. So I want to share with you what I got when I actually did that with this example. I went to talk to some students who were not actually the Madge persona I put together. They didn't have exactly those characteristics, but they fit that fairly well. And what I heard was, as I shared with them these steps in the scenario, that yes, we do go look it up in the course outline. Do you go buy it from the bookstore? I heard, well, yeah, sometimes, or I buy it online, or from students who've taken the course before. And I also heard I don't buy it from some people, which was new to my assumptions. Okay, let's move on. When I talked about bringing it into and using it in class, I heard not usually, or I heard sometimes. I heard I also don't bring it on trips. Like I go home for the weekend. I don't take it to my girlfriend or boyfriend's place. So there's some insight gained there. Not the insights I talked about before, bad choice of words, some knowledge gained around the process. And then when asked about selling it after the course, I heard almost always, that's exactly right. But I wouldn't actually mind keeping some parts of books. Some of those things that were in there did make sense to me. I wouldn't mind keeping them, but I do need to sell it for the money reasons. So I've gained some knowledge about my process, where I'm right and where I was wrong. I also would then sit down, imagine sitting in a group and saying, okay, so what I heard, what did you hear? Let's pull it all together. Well, I definitely heard that some students don't buy the book. I heard that those that do buy it don't always bring it to class, and that's a surprise. If you're going to buy it, why not? And I heard that it's often not needed, even if I bring it. So those were surprising, and they're kind of almost at the insight level, but not really, because I want to drill deeper to that what and why of the problem. And the further I talked with students who could be personas in this situation, I've coined this term called the relevance per dollar. Books are, and this is just an example by the way, just trying to illustrate how I get to an insight based on feedback from people like my persona. I buy a $180 book or $300 book with 36 chapters or 50 chapters, and I only use 5 of them. Now, this isn't every class, of course, but I'm hearing this. So there's this relevance per dollar notion, that I'm not getting good value per dollar. It's not relevant per dollar. So that is an insight I took away. And I'll bring back the other two just for the sake of keeping this short. 5 to 6 textbooks are heavy, and the cost of books was too high. So those are my takeaways. I can also, after refining my insights, go back and look at my scenario, the yellow boxes. Can I improve that based on what I learned? Well, I know that I don't just buy from the bookstore. I also know that some people don't use the books they buy. They just go and sell them after. I also learned that some people don't even buy books. So I've been able to refine my scenario, much more useful, and gain some insights about that scenario that are fairly useful. Now again, these are just understanding the problem. They're not prescribing a solution, but I could now sit down and say, okay guys, later, not as part of this use scenario, but I could say, yeah, okay, I've learned something here. I understand the scenario better. I've gained some insights about the problems and the pain points. What could we do now? And go into solution mode later. I just want to contrast what we just had on the screen to this. How at the beginning, I hope you see now how shallow or quick or cursory that was. Bookstores needing to stock books, students needing backpacks, totally irrelevant. And how that bottom right box, especially, needing a buy it back solution in the bookstore, is solution oriented and not problem oriented. And I'll just show this one again because it's such a richer, more well focused version of a scenario in Insights. We'll skip past this, and I'll bring this up again, my goal being to use someone like Madge as a representative to drive it out, go out and test it against real people, all in the vein of trying to come up with a better approach to textbooks. And it was hypothetical, of course. There's lots out there, like iPads right now, and there's solutions online that have nothing to do and they're all free. There's lots of things out there. I'm just trying to illustrate how this kind of thing works. I've been in the problem and opportunity space on purpose. I'm talking about the customer use scenario, and I've shown you briefly the doodler that you can use for that if you want to, the tool. And I've talked of how you gain insights about the customer, the problems they're having and the pain points, and about the value proposition of your offering, or requirements of that offering, what it might look like. These are things that we've been able to gather from that. And this is that customer use scenario. You can now see the yellow post-it notes which show the scenario. You can see the insight being captured on the bottom. I won't go into that in much more detail. You can play with the tool and figure it out fairly quickly, and you can find it at that link. So we've understood better the problem, the context, and the persona. That's when you can move down to the solution space, and that's where I want to point you to the Super Hunt Sketchpad, or the Really Big Idea Sketchpad, or perhaps you're already in the business model phase. Whatever it might be, that's where you shift to solution. I'll just show you a couple sketches here, pictures of the Super Hunt Sketchpad, and that's where you can find it. So this is where you could bring that insight back and refine the sketchpad, refine the hunch, or bring the insight you've gained from the customer use scenario back and refine the Really Big Idea Sketchpad. That's what I want you to do after having done that. And this is where you talk about solutions. I understand my customer better. I understand my value proposition better. I know better what I might offer. Let's talk about that in more detail now that I've done a customer use scenario. So go out there, model your big ideas, and thank you very much.